Hello, well, I'm going to do a few films actually on making wallets, and I thought in this one I'd tell you a little bit about the design of wallet I'm making and about the leather and about little sort of design features. And in subsequent films I'll put one up on how I cut them out and how I assemble them, and hopefully it will give you quite a nice little insight into wallet making. And I've been spending hours and hours and hours on this recent, so it's quite interesting though. There's so many different kinds of wallet design you could come up with, and I've chosen a simple vertical wallet because actually I find they sit in your pocket very comfortably. They're not too bulky. This one I've got it down to it's 3 inches when it's closed by 4 3/4. So it's fairly compact. That's what, 75 by, is it 120? Something like that. Yeah, 120 millimeters. So it's quite a nice compact wallet. But one of the real challenges with a wallet is actually to make them fairly compact when they're closed. And what I've done with this, I'm using a full thickness leather on the outside, but on the inside I have thinned the leather right down to a millimetre at its thinnest points, but I've done it differentially. So I've got thicker leather around by the seam here where it takes the most stress. So that's still at 2 millimetre. And then I immediately thin everything else behind to 1 millimetre. That's been quite a technical challenge, but quite an interesting one. And I'm using fairly traditional T-slot pieces. So what that means is these are sort of assembled inside the wallet. It basically means when you put your credit card in the wallet, it stops at a certain sort of depth, and you don't lose your card down the back of the wallet. There's nothing more irritating. So it means your cards are perfectly spaced. So I've put in T-slots. Now I know a lot of people, when they put in T-slots, they thin just the bottom edge to make the wallet less bulky. I've actually gone one further on this, and I've thinned the whole piece to make it really just all quite a bit flatter. So it's lots of little bits of detail really, which makes things quite interesting, and I've enjoyed it. The actual leather I'm using, I didn't want to use any sort of leather. I was determined to use a vegetable tanned leather because I personally think it's rather nice, and there aren't that many vegetable tanned leather wallets around, so I wanted something a bit different. And I'm using Russian hatch leather, and it smells absolutely delightful. It is quite a sort of, when you first get the leather from the tannery, it is quite a distinctive smell. Some people say it's like Lapsang tea, and I think that's a pretty good analogy. I, interestingly enough, showed a few of my woodworking bodger friends and asked them to say what did they think of the smell, and only one, she correctly identified it and immediately said, birch oil. She'd been, I think, involved with using birch oil as a preservative, and also actually making some birch oil. So most others have said, bit like tea, or I don't know, it's nice though. People generally like it. It is quite strong, quite distinctive while it's new, and then it sort of wears off as you have it in your pocket. But I can still, on my one, I can still get a nice little aroma. It's very nice. You end up being in the post office, sort of sniffing your wallet. I shouldn't really do that. No, lock me up. So it's Russian hatch, and it's been hand rollered, so the leather has this rather nice hatch grain. Now, Russian hatch leather used to be made obviously in Russia, and it was commonly made prior to the Russian Revolution. This is where the story gets quite interesting. They lost the recipe basically with the Russian Revolution, and it was no longer made. And the sort of way it was made was down in folklore, but it wasn't actively being made. Anyway, in more recent times, a ship was found just off Plymouth Sound, and it was the Meta Katerina, which was a ship going from Russia on its way to Genoa. And lo and behold, what did it have? It had a cargo of Russian leather all rolled up in the hold. And it was found in 1973. It had been under the water for nearly 200 years, but the leather in the centre of the rolls was actually quite well preserved. So what they've been doing is basically trying to replicate the leather, and that's what I'm using. It's a beautiful job they've done. It took them, I think, about 4 years, and lots of people involved, expert tanners from both this country, from France, from Russia, etc. But they've come up with this lovely Russian grain leather. And it really does makes the workshop feel still quite high. It's tanned in pits, so it's traditional pit tanned leather, but it goes through multiple pits over like 14 months, so it's quite a long tannage period. And they use tree bark, so they use oak bark, and of course, as you know, quite a lot of my belts are oak bark tanned, but in addition to oak they also use willow and birch. And when it's gone through the tanning process, they then infuse it with birch oil, so it makes it last a lot longer, and also it repels insects. Not that you're probably too worried with a wallet unless you have moths in your wallet, but no, it repels insects, so it's quite a nice sort of form of leather, used on very high class items, but it is durable. So for me it was the ideal sort of leather to try and get hold of and use. And what I'll do, in subsequent film, I'll show you how I cut the leather out, and then in another film how I actually stitch and assemble the wallet. So give you a bit of an insight into how they're made. But that's, yeah, introduction to wallets and a bit of a hint as to what's coming next. Okay then, thanks very much. Bye bye.